Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Yankee Cowboy Podcast. And we're going diving right into the week 4 of the NFL and just kind of giving an overall synopsis of what the hell happened this week in the NFL. And to be honest with you, nothing really changed in the NFL. The parity did not change. There were some few unexpected results. However, um, just downright, the play calling has gotten to that point. The officiating has gotten slower, so we're doing okay. And overall, I think we as fans can kind of see what we're going to see for the rest of the season. And it started off on the Thursday night game with the Dallas Cowboys facing the New York Giants there at MetLife. And the Cowboys, up until that point, the game was never really uh, out of reach of winning. It was just a back and forth matchup. Uh, the Cowboys definitely did not play their best football. And the fact of the matter is, they held the Giants at bay to 15 points. And Malik Neighbors got hurt late in the game there. He had 12 reception for 115 yards, arguably probably the best receiving of the day, with the weather being what it was going to be. But legitimately, the Cowboys, I hate to say it to all of you fans, the Cowboys suck. Get over yourselves. Every single one of you. They suck. They overpaid Dak Prescott that $60 million. You'd be lucky to get to the wild card at this point. All right. That being said, there's my haterade for the Dallas Cowboys for the beginning of the podcast episode. The rest of the slate of games really wasn't too many surprises, right? You kind of go through the list. There was a few, and I'm not dismissing those, but I am saying is that the ones that were, the game was close, and it shouldn't have been. And arguably, some of the matchups you go, didn't see that one coming. For example, the Falcons versus the Saints. The Saints have arguably put on 40 points on the board for the first 2 weeks of the NFL and have now pretty much steadily put around 20-ish points on the board for the last 2 weeks. And Derek Carr still is putting on a performance. Alvin Kamara is still doing his thing. Kirk Cousins still doing his thing. So, but that matchup with the Falcons winning was surprising. And the next divisional game, and that was a divisional game there in the NFC South, which, you know, that's usually the most competitive, but the records don't show it, if that makes sense, when it comes to the playoffs. The Vikings and the Packers out of the NFC North, that game was really a 28-7 Vikings lead into the half, and then the Packers try to basically, they kept it pretty close, and it was Jordan Love's return to the team after being out for an injury, and they kept it. They brought it close, but at the end of the day, the Vikings win that game 31-29. Big takeaway there is honestly Jordan Love is back, and it's going to be a competitive division. Now the Vikings are definitely going to be a team to beat down the stretch here. There's no question about that. The next one that I really want to take away is another big key takeaway is the Eagles and the Buccaneers. The media got really drawn into what Tom Brady said in response to Baker Mayfield being, this isn't, what's stressful is not having Super Bowl rings, and, he doesn't run a daycare, hate to say it, but that's Tom Brady for you. He could still play right now if he wanted to, but time's time. Father Time knows no hold boundaries there, and he doesn't need to do that anymore. Let him do well the booth. Let him have some fun. But yeah, the Buccaneers winning this game against the Eagles handedly, 33-16. There's going to be slowly start to become more calls for Nick Sirianni to be fired here if the team continues to perform the way it does. Then something's going to change, right? So Eagles have not scored many points all 4 weeks. They're still 2-2. And overall, just it doesn't seem like it's a solid performance. The Buccaneers obviously have a huge amount of weaponry. Um, Mike Evans, Baker Mayfield, Chris Godwin. There's many that go on there on the weapons side of the ball for the Buccaneers. So not to be taking that away from them, but the Philadelphia Eagles did not play well in this game. The one thing I will say for the 1 o'clock slot of games that we had actually a kind of a how do you say a parody of games is the Steelers and Colts. Now, you know, the Steelers a very good team going into this game. Now, this game had some very different issues for a lot of reasons. One is you had uh, Justin Fields for the Steelers, okay, and you had Anthony Richardson. Now, Richardson gets hurt on a play; his hip gets hurt. He leaves the game for a couple plays, comes back, and they call a run play. So I think the Indianapolis Colts coaches really need to reevaluate as well what they really, what they did there. And it just really just I don't get it, and it's something to be reevaluated for sure. On the coaching side, for sure, I would hope to have that reexamined, and just hopefully Anthony Richardson's not out for a long term thing. But Joe Flacco came in relief, and the Colts won that game 27-24. Now, there was a lot of back and forth in that game. Just Taylor was doing his thing. He ran for 21 carries at 88 yards and a touchdown. A lot of good things for the Indianapolis Colts offensive side of the ball. Not to be confused with the next game, really, that I really was just baffled by was the Bears and Rams game. Now, I don't see how this was a good game at all. This was pretty much trash at trash's finest. And, the Bears win this game 24-18. But, Caleb Williams basically running around the field like an idiot. And, the Rams pretty much handing them the game on just making mistakes and mental errors. So, I mean, that's why I'm glad with the NFL Sunday Ticket, you can pretty much scroll around the games and figure it out from there. Now, I'll take that back. Talk about trash of a game. You go into the Jets and Broncos game. Now, no excuses here. There is an excuse, and that is called the weather wasn't all that great. And that's kind of, the score was only 10-9, and Bo Nix gets himself a win against Aaron Rodgers and the Jets on the road. And honestly, it was definitely a close game, and it was up to a missed field goal was the reason why, the reason why the game didn't get won by the Jets. So that overall, that parody and that narrative that you're going to see down the stretch here out of the AFC East is just the Buffalo Bills are being the Buffalo Bills. The Cincinnati Bengals barely defeat the Carolina Panthers 34-24. Joe Burrow wins his first game of the year. That game wasn't really fun to watch. Now, the 4 o'clock, games were probably the most confusing games because you didn't expect some of these teams to win, right? And I mean that respectfully. The Texans beating the Jaguars, I think, at a score of 24-20. For the Jaguars to keep that game competitive down the stretch there is pretty much a remarkable thing. And, they were leading. Actually, no, they weren't. Hold on. Let me read that line score again. I apologize. They were up 13. So it was 17-13 at the half. Jaguars scored a touchdown in the third. And then the Texans win a touchdown in the fourth. So that's where that line score goes. But really, C.J. Stroud, 27 for 40 He's doing a really good job. It's against the Houston Texans. It's the Houston Texans versus the Jaguars. So it's an in division thing, and it'd be very interesting to see what happens next. But the game that I respectfully don't want to talk about, and I'll talk about it, is the 49ers and Patriots. And there was nothing good about this game on the Patriots side of the ball. And I know we're rebuilding as a fan base. I understand that. But there was nothing good that came of this game. Not a thing. You scored one touchdown in the third, and you scored 2 field goals. You got to get the ball down the field. You have to score points against certain teams, and the 49ers are one of them. They have some of the most high-octane offensive side of weapons in the game of football today. And I hate to say it, but it felt like a scrimmage. I'm glad I turned that game off. I really did. The Browns and the Raiders, I just Deshaun Watson having what I would like to call a non-successful game against the Raiders, and just watching the Raiders kind of just claw back into that game. And you want to talk about another organization that's going through a rebuild? That's the Raiders, right? There's talks today at the day of this recording of Devontae Adams potentially being moved, potentially, and because of what he said on social media. That's very well possible. And if Devontae Adams gets moved, hopefully it's the state of Texas. Hopefully it's a team or a state that maybe it's the Kansas City Chiefs, or maybe it's the Miami Dolphins. They need some more high. Some team needs a receiver. I just think Devontae is going to try to go to a team that is more of the tax burden is off of him, and I hope he does that. But definitely not a good showing for the Browns, but the Raiders doing their thing, and they're 2-2. The one team that surprises me the most this week, and I genuinely believe that, is the Washington Commanders. Jalen Daniels and James Conner for the Arizona Cardinals. It was a running game. It was basically 42-14. And that's the thing. The game was so out of reach, but he put on the game on his back, and the team is 3-1, leading the NFC East. Not the Dallas Cowboys, not the Philadelphia Eagles. No, the Washington Commanders are leading the NFC East. So let that be said. The disappointment of the week really is this next 2 games for Sunday night, in my view. The Chiefs and the Chargers game, in my view, was another upsetting display of just, how do I put it? It wasn't upsetting in a sense where it made me emotional. It was just like boring, just downright disappointing to watch. You are supposedly the defending back-to-back national, Super Bowl champions, and for you to only put up 17 points on the board against the LA Chargers, who are, I would say, going through a rebuild, because their team, they have weapons that you probably have never heard of before on the LA Chargers. So for them to even go through what they're going through, and for the Chiefs to only put on 17 points, and of course the talk of the town was the Travis Kelce, a lack of productivity and all this other stuff. That's fine. There's going to be talks like that. It's just how it is in the game of football. But that doesn't change anything. You still got to put. I would expect them to be at least 24 points here. I expected them to be a decisive game. It was decisive. It was a 10-7. It was 10-10 going into the fourth quarter. That's not how your defending champions are supposed to be playing. And I think Chiefs fans are, obviously there was a receiver that got injured, and I think they're going to start. They're trying to go through the tests right now to see if that receiver is going to be out. But I'll be very interested to see what goes on with the Chiefs going forward here. They're obviously leading the division with a 4-0 record right now, but they're going to face some teams down the stretch here in the AFC that are going to give them some true tests. And I think they need to kind of reevaluate. The real disappointing game of the week, and not really disappointing as a fan of the New England Patriots, because nothing makes my heart grow fonder than watching the Bills lose. And it just makes me all excited to watch the Bills lose. But to watch the Ravens thump the shit out of the Bills 35-10 on Sunday Night Football with Derrick Henry being a man amongst boys, 24 carries for 199 yards and 1 touchdown. Ladies and gentlemen, if you cannot deny the fact that Derrick Henry is literally a beast. He is the man. Like, there is no question about that. And for him, and the other running back for the Baltimore Ravens as well had 6 receptions. I apologize. 78 yards and a touchdown. So a very complimentary game of football there. They scored 35 points, so I would hope so. But the Sunday games, in my view, they're always going to be better than the Monday night games. The Monday games obviously had a 2 slate of games, the Titans and the Dolphins, and then the Seahawks and the Lions. I will say this, that I don't feel sorry for the Miami Dolphins at all. That is just a terrible, terrible way of showing your team on the primetime slate of games. They only put up 12 points on the board. They could not score the ball. They could not move the ball. And they deserved to lose. And it was 31-12. Now, the Lions against the Seahawks, that game was interesting. It was awesome to watch, actually. Geno Smith doing his thing, throwing for almost 400 yards. Kenneth Walker doing 12 carries for 80 yards, 3 touchdowns. DK Metcalf doing 7 for 104. But the score was 42-29 Lions. So you can tell that there was not much defense played on this game. But I will say this, the parity that I really, truly was talking about at the very beginning of this podcast, if you look at the standings right now after week 4, because I always consider the season to go in quarters. Like, this is the first quarter of the season. Buffalo Bills are still in the head of the AFC East. New York Jets are 2-2, okay? And the Patriots and the Dolphins are carrying up the bottom of that division. Those guys aren't the thing is that I think a lot of people need to recognize is that this is a very long season, but don't be surprised what we're seeing the same parity week in and week out of like the teams like the Ravens, the Steelers, the Colts, the Texans, the Kansas City Chiefs on the AFC side duking it out, right? I don't think the Bengals down the stretch here are going to be competitive. I think it's going to be the Baltimore Ravens here out of the AFC North. If Derrick Henry can keep this up, the Baltimore Ravens are going to be a very different team down the stretch of the season, and they're going to be very difficult to beat, right? So I don't think anybody at the AFC West is going to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. They might make the rest of the division's 2-2. So that tells you everything you need to know. But the AFC isn't so much the competitive part of the NFL. And I think that's where fans are missing out. There's a lot of competitive moving parts on the NFC side of the ball. On the side of the season, side of the conference, side of everything. The Washington Commanders being 3-1. Dallas Cowboys not performing what they should be. Eagles not performing like they should be. The Vikings resurgence against in the NFC North. Detroit Lions, the Green Bay Packers even doing what they do with a pretty young quarterback. It's pretty good. The NFC South, however, that's going to be the difference, in my opinion, when it comes to entertainment down the stretch of the season, because those teams are really closely competitive. Everyone thinks it's going to be the Saints or the Buccaneers. It's going to be pretty close to being all teams. The NFC West is going to be the 49ers and the Seahawks. Every year it's going to be that way. Always. And I think the Seahawks are performing well right now, but we're going to start seeing a resurgence of the 49ers here week over week after they get more accustomed to Christian McCaffrey, being out on injury. He's definitely going to be out probably till week 10 or 12. I don't see him coming back this year. I really don't. Some teams might still see that happening and they might prepare for him. but I don't see it. If he's getting tests outside the country of the United States for his injury, that tells me that he doesn't trust the doctors or he wants a second opinion, which is okay. Nothing wrong with a good second opinion. But when you're going to Germany, you're going to Achilles specialist and you're going to these specialists and you're getting the answers so you can make a decision. All that does is tick off time away from you, right? That doesn't allow you to come back because the surgery is going to take so much of this, right? And then you have to do the recovery process. You can ask Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers can tell you that the Achilles is not an easy injury to come back from, let alone as a running back that is probably used more versatile. There's more versatility. There is a usage of the running back position for Christian there, CMC. And I think he's going to have surgery and it's going to take him out. But the 49ers have a lot of weapons there. So very interested to see what they do. Very interested to see what the NFC North continues to grow. I mean, I love living here in Dallas, Texas, but nothing makes my heart fonder and more full than watching the Dallas Cowboys lose, especially after all the crap talking they did against me as a Patriots fan. Let me tell you this story before I leave here leave this episode. Nothing discourages me more about a city that I live in, more watching them cheer for the Philadelphia Eagles in the Super Bowl against the Patriots. I want you all to remember that. So the fans of the Cowboys, they do the same thing every year. They do the same nonsense. We're going to the Super Bowl. We're going to the Super Bowl. No, the only thing you're going to is to the bar to watch somebody else play in the Super Bowl, ladies and gentlemen. That's what you're doing. Okay? That's what you're doing. Your team's going to lose probably the first week of the divisional round and go home. That's what they do. Now, they're going to go, hey, Tim, your team ain't going to make it this year. Listen, my team, the New England Patriots, won 6 Super Bowls in my lifetime. And I'm a young person. Okay? So listen, if we don't make the championship for 2 to 3 years, maybe 5, not going to hurt my feelings. It's going to be very interesting to watch them develop into the roster that they want to become. And, hopefully by then, Patrick Mahomes retires. And he doesn't win 6 Super Bowls like Tom, or 7 Super Bowls like Tom Brady. So, and because there's only one GOAT in this lifetime, and his name is TB12. And that's not being biased. That's just matter of facts. And at the time of this recording, I'd like to send my condolences to the Pete Rose family. As a diehard baseball fan as well, it's difficult to read that, but I knew he was going through some health issues. And DK Mutombo died of brain cancer as well yesterday. And that's a very troubling thing. Some of your sports icons that, regardless of what people are known for their actions on and off the field, you have to understand their legacy and what they do for the sport that they play in. And I think both players that passed away yesterday have a unique they had a unique way of putting their efforts on the court and off into the world, and they did it their way. Pete Rose, I think, unfortunately, he was banned from the sport that he loved. There was no other way of putting it. He broke a rule, but this has been over 30 years. And his accomplishments on the field are not something to be just shrugged off or brushed off the shoulder. I think Pete Rose deserves to be in the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, regardless of what people think. He's an accomplished, great player. During an era of baseball that was primarily functioned as a pitcher's league, he hit really well. And he deserves the Hall of Fame. And I hope they eventually, when the time is right, induct him into Cooperstown, because that's where he belongs. Hope everyone has a great rest of your week. Keep on driving. Keep on watching all that fun NFL football. Sports will be sports. We'll get back to the politics, I promise you. We got one cooking up for you this week, too, because we're about almost 30 days out from the election. This is the Yank Cowboys signing off. Have a good rest of your week.